Ever feel like, I don't know about you, but sometimes I feel like I'm just sitting here waiting for web apps to, catch up. Like even with a decent internet connection, there's this lag, you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, totally.
Well, it seems like Angular 18 is trying to fix that.
Yeah.
They're really focusing on speed and giving developers the tools they need to build really efficient,
Mhm.
experiences for users.
And that's what's really interesting here. I mean, Angular has always been able to build these complex,
Right.
apps, but optimizing them, always a balancing act, right? And what we're seeing now in Angular 18, it's not just about making things faster, it's about making the lives of developers easier, which in the end,
Yeah, that's huge.
that's huge. It really is.
That makes a big
You
difference.
sure?
So one of the things that they're doing, at least that I saw in the release notes that caught my eye, is this zoneless change detection.
Okay.
Now, I'll be honest, the first time I read that, I was like, all right, what in the world does that even mean?
Right, yeah.
But essentially, the way I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's kind of like before, Angular was constantly checking in the background
Yeah.
to see if anything had changed, even if nothing had
It's
changed.
constantly refreshing.
Yeah, like that one friend who just keeps hitting refresh on their inbox, even though,
Exactly. It's like they swapped out a gas-guzzling car for an electric one.
Okay.
The
I see.
app's just using fewer resources. It's running smoother. It's just better all around. And you know what? This really ties in directly with what they're doing with the Ivy rendering upgrades.
Okay.
So think of Ivy as like the engine, under the hood of Angular.
Okay.
And they've basically streamlined this engine, right? They made it leaner, faster, more efficient. So not only are we eliminating those unnecessary checks in the background, but the entire core rendering process is just snappier. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. I was also reading about deferrable views.
Mm.
And this one seems like it could be huge, especially like you were saying, if you're building something complex, if you're working with huge data sets.
Oh, yeah.
Like imagine, for example, loading a massive spreadsheet instead of trying to load the entire spreadsheet all at once,
Right.
which, as we know, can really bog down, your browser, your computer.
Absolutely.
Angular 18 is now letting you only load the parts that you're actively viewing.
It's all about what you need when you need it. It's like when you're getting ready for, a bid presentation,
Yeah.
you need the key points, right? You don't need the entire company history from the last 20 years just to get going. And deferrable views, it's kind of bringing that same, I don't know, I guess, focus to web apps.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And then also in this vein of making developers' lives easier, we have the enhanced CLI.
Yes.
And just for our listeners who maybe aren't as familiar, CLI stands for Command Line Interface.
Mm.
Basically, it's that tool that, you use pretty much every day if you're working with Angular.
Right, to build and manage your projects.
Yeah.
And the really cool thing about these enhancements is that it's clear that the Angular team is really, really focused on what they call like the cognitive load on developers, They're trying to reduce it. It's like they want the CLI in Angular 18 to be like this helpful assistant, that's
Mhm.
always there, anticipating your needs, automating those common tasks so that you, as the developer, can just focus on writing good, clean code.
That's awesome.
That's the dream, right?
Yeah, yeah. Now, here's where I really start to geek out with this release.
Mhm.
Okay. The release notes also mentioned some server-side rendering enhancements.
Okay.
And I mean, I want to hear your thoughts on this because we've talked about this idea of a smoother user experience, which is obviously very important.
Right.
But server-side rendering, it also has a huge impact on things like SEO, right? And how quickly users are actually able to see the content on the page.
It's huge. I mean, those are some of the hidden benefits that most people, when they're just browsing a website, they don't think about.
Yeah.
But yeah, it has a huge impact. Yeah.
And I think this leads us to an interesting question, a final thought here. If Angular is this focused on performance now, with all of these optimizations, all working together,
Working in tandem.
what does that mean for the future of web app complexity? I mean, can we start building even more ambitious applications without sacrificing speed or that seamless user experience? I mean, it feels like this release, it's just the start,
It's exciting.
It's an exciting time to be a developer.
It really is.
Yeah.
That's